All right, folks, we are live. It's been a while since you've seen us, Justin and Donald, coming at you with our just kind of like a basic primer on ESG. I think if that you're in the dark about this and you want to know about why this is such an important thing, this is the video to listen to. So we're going to get through a lot of information on this, but stick with us because I think that this is probably the most important issue going on in America right now. And that I know is saying a lot, but I think we can back it up. So before I jump into it, though, I do want to put that message out there to everybody that help us kind of break through those big tech algorithms that prevent content like ours from being shown to more people. You can do this very easily, but just by doing a handful of things. Hitting that like button, hitting that share button, subscribing if you haven't already, even leaving a comment below the video will help break through that big tech algorithm and help our videos spread to more and more people. So for the people that are tuning into our channel for the first time ever, I just want to briefly go over just who we are. Consider this an introductory episode for you. So I'm Donald Kendal. This is Justin Haskins above me. We work at the Heartland Institute, a public policy think tank. And one of the benefits that Justin and I have enjoyed at the Heartland Institute is having a pretty long leash. We kind of get to focus on what we think is important. And with this freedom, we created the Socialism Research Center. So shortly after the creation of the Socialism Research Center, a couple of interesting events, a couple of coincidences allowed us to begin working with Glenn Beck. And this created a relationship where we worked with Glenn on his 2020 book, Arguing with Socialists. Fast forward a couple of months, Justin calls me up on the phone, and he starts reading off a bunch of interesting quotes of some of the most important people in the world, all talking about this thing called the Great Reset. And now this was before anyone was talking about the Great Reset. So I have just a couple of examples for you. Klaus Schwab, he is the head of the World Economic Forum, quote, "Every country from the United States to China must participate, and every industry from oil and gas to tech must be transformed. In short, we need a great reset of capitalism." Another quote, this is by then Prince Charles. "As we move from rescue to recovery, we have a unique but rapidly shrinking window of opportunity to learn lessons and reset ourselves on a more sustainable path." And he probably, during this phone call, Justin probably rattled off a dozen more people representing the UN, Greenpeace International, you name it, all talking about this great reset. So I thought to myself, okay, great. You know, we can look into this. Global elites all saying stuff from seemingly the same talking points. This will be interesting fodder for our center. But as we started to piece together the mechanisms that were designed to initiate this reset and this plan to transform capitalism, we quickly realized just how important of an issue this really was. So when you hear the words the Great Reset, you've been conditioned to think that this is some sort of baseless conspiracy theory. It's not really rooted in reality. But we listened to the speeches, we read the documents, we even transcribed talks of these people in certain cases. And we discovered...
We sound like losers here.
That's true.
Just say that.
That's true. I mean, that comes with it. That comes with the space. But we discovered that the backbone of this entire plan, the engine that would drive the transformation of every country and every industry, was ESG. So we did the research and we put together all the puzzle pieces. And when we saw the entire picture, we realized what we had to do. We had to go tell Glenn Beck. So when Glenn saw what we had uncovered and realized the implications of this system, he sprung to action using his influence and his microphone to warn every freedom-loving person out there, which brings us to where we are today. So despite the seemingly innocuous name, ESG, this might be the most important issue going on in America. It's an issue that may change the very way our world operates. It's an issue that might serve as an end around to all the freedoms we cherish so dearly here in the United States. And it's an issue that might be defeatable if we get everybody to truly understand just how insidious this system truly is. So I want to turn it over to Justin at this time to give us a nice short explainer of ESG.
Right. Yes. Nice and short. That's the goal for this. There's a whole there's a whole lot of information that we want to get through in this video. The goal is, earlier Donnie said this is a primer, a short primer. It's a little more than a short primer. It's really it goes into a lot of the details. ESG is incredibly complex, and so by ESG standards, it's a short primer. But to most people, this is going to be mind-blowing information. It's going to explain so many of the different things that are happening in the world today, from woke corporations transforming the culture to energy prices skyrocketing. All sorts of different things that are going on in the world is related to ESG and the Great Reset. And I think by the end of the presentation, you're going to be convinced of that reality, not just opinion, but reality, that that's what's going on. So let's start diving into some of the details. We're going to start off with really basic stuff about ESG. I know there's a lot of you who are watching this video right now who have a good sense of at least some aspects of ESG. But it's going to get a lot more complicated as we go along. But because some of you watching may not know anything about it, we want to make sure that you have at least the basics, so that the stuff that comes later in the presentation makes a lot more sense to you. So let's just start off with a basic, what is ESG? All right. And we'll go from there. So this is ESG is part of something called stakeholder capitalism. It's a whole new way of thinking about the economy. When Klaus Schwab and people at the World Economic Forum talk about transforming the global economy, pushing the reset button on the global economy, they mean stakeholder capitalism. Now, stakeholder capitalism is a misnomer because it's really not a form of capitalism. It's a form of cronyism, of corruption, of elites managing and even micromanaging society. But it isn't capitalism. It isn't free market capitalism, to say the least. There is private property ownership in it, but the whole point is to have a group of people at the top controlling how the rest of society works. So the way that they control society through under stakeholder capitalism is ESG. This is the framework for evaluating businesses. It's a social credit scoring system, similar to what you have in China. They've just rolled out a social credit scoring system there. That's what ESG is. ESG is the way to determine who the good companies are and who the bad companies are. It's not focused on profit, debt, customer satisfaction, any of the traditional business metrics. Again, it's focused on who the good companies are, who the bad companies are in the minds of the people who are in control of ESG. So the whole point of this is the whole point of ESG foundationally is to coerce businesses into acting in ways that the market would never cause them to behave. So that's the whole point of ESG. The goal is to create new metrics that people are going to be measured by, businesses are going to be measured by, so that they will pursue the goals that elites think are important, even though they don't necessarily make sense for their business. All right. So who's behind ESG? Who supports it? Who are the primary drivers behind ESG? Well, you have the World Economic Forum. These are the people who run Davos every year. Donnie already mentioned that ESG is a huge part of the Great Reset campaign. This is when we first started learning about ESG. We have all sorts of writings from people like Klaus Schwab and other leaders at the World Economic Forum, members of the board of directors, companies who've been involved with the WF for a long time, talking about ESG and how important it is for bringing about the Great Reset. You have the world's largest banks and financial institutions like JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America. Basically, every large bank in America and many of the large banks in Europe are all behind it. World's largest insurance companies, Allianz, AXA, Lloyd, Zurich. There's a whole bunch of others that are behind it as well. Asset managers like BlackRock, Credit Suisse, State Street Global Advisors, Vanguard, etc., all huge supporters of ESG, using ESG to transform society. Of course, you have the United Nations, and in particular, its Race to Zero campaign. One of the primary goals of ESG is embedding the something called SDGs, which is the what are those SDGs? Sustainable Development Goals, right? embedding sustainable development goals in business models. That's one of the primary things. So when you think of Agenda 21, for example, those are sustainable development goals. Agenda 2030, those are sustainable development goals. So the goal of ESG really is to take SDGs and put them into the business model where they normally wouldn't be there. Consumers don't care in many cases whether a company is engaging well on their SDGs or they're actually trying to pursue these UN goals. But that's what the United Nations wants, and that's what a lot of elite institutions want. And so they built that into the ESG framework. Race to Zero, which is about Race to Zero. The zero there is talking about carbon dioxide emissions. This is a huge campaign in the United Nations. And the primary purpose of this is to embed ESG into corporations so that they are trying to reduce their carbon footprints down to zero, even if it doesn't make sense for their business model. So there's a whole bunch of different groups and companies that are involved in this coalition, this Race to Zero campaign. We don't need to get into the details of all of that, but you can see thousands and thousands of companies all over the world, 11,000 non-state actors, 8,000 companies, 595 financial institutions, et cetera. And they've all committed to using ESG as a way to make sure that they're pushing the world towards this goal for zero carbon dioxide emissions. In addition to all of these huge institutions, you also have lots of political and activist organizations, including Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister of the United Nations, Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, the head of the United Nations, the head of the IMF, John Kerry, who's currently serving in the Biden administration as climate czar, CEOs of huge banks like Bank of America, Microsoft, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Volvo, governments in all over the world, but especially in Europe. Again, we talked about banks, big tech companies like Apple, basically every gigantic corporation you can think of, or almost everyone, is in some way caught up in this, has expressed support for ESG or the Great Reset in some form or another. And this is just a very small list of companies. There's a whole lot of others. So when you're looking at corporate adoption of ESG, so you look at ESG and you say, okay, so there's a lot of people behind it, but there's probably a lot of corporations who are not behind it. That's a nice thought. It would be great if that were true, but it's not true at all. Actually, there's been detailed studies that have been done on corporate adoption of ESG. And what we found is that even though a lot of people, a lot of conservatives are first finding out about ESG now, it's been around for a very long time. It's been put into place over the past decade. And studies have shown that a huge number of corporations, including the vast majority of corporations in the United States, large corporations in the United States, already have ESG embedded in their companies. So there's one report by KPMG that's particularly influential that showed, I believe this was from 2021, that showed 82% of large corporations in the United States have ESG already in place. And then even more incredibly than that, 96% of the G250, so these are the 250 largest companies in the Fortune 500, they have ESG reports too. So the biggest, most influential, most important corporations, the ones that produce the vast majority of products that people buy, the ones that employ about half of Americans, the overwhelming majority of them all have ESG built into their frameworks right now. So it's not something that could happen in the future. It's something that's already happening and has been widely adopted by corporate leaders across basically every industry.
Yeah, and I want to jump in and talk a little bit more about this concept of the stakeholder capitalism. Justin already kind of mentioned it a little bit at the front end of that. But when you listen to any of the proponents of ESG talk, they'll try to attempt to convince you that stakeholder capitalism is just a better flavor of the capitalism we operate under today, what they would call shareholder capitalism. They claim that shareholder capitalism only, works for the top 1%, that the system only does what the boardroom executives want, and anyone else is just kind of out of luck. The ESG stakeholder capitalism, on the other hand, takes everybody into account, making sure that everyone from the people in the boardrooms to the person sweeping the floors at night have a say of what corporations and business and how all of that work is done. And in reality, it's the complete opposite. In the real free market system, your average everyday person does have a say in how business is done. People participate in the system by voting with their dollars. You don't like a product? Buy a different one. Don't like how a company is being run? Buy from a different one. Under the ESG stakeholder capitalism system, your average person has no increased say in how things are run. In fact, they probably have less. These metrics on which companies are judged are not open to some democratic process. No, they're devised by some group of elitist bureaucrats, and I, as the consumer representing the last link in the chain, has no say over this system. So instead, they crafted these metrics as if they're doing something for my best interests. That's why they dress these things up as some sort of green agenda or some type of social justice effort. So when you look at ESG and how it's broken down into three pillars: this environmental, social, and governance. So if you click a little bit there, Justin, you'll see some of the E in ESG, which is the green agenda stuff. So this includes things like greenhouse gas emissions, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrogen emissions, stuff like that. Nature loss. How big of an environmental impact does your business have? Water usage, a whole host of different measurements like that. That these are now the metrics on which a company is going to be judged. And if you flip over, you'll see that the S and the G have to do with various metrics that can be categorized under the more of the social justice banner. This includes things like diversity and inclusion, or even like total taxes paid, because you have to make sure that everyone's paying their fair share. Or if these businesses pay livable wages, you name it, they probably have a metric for it. And again, this is how these companies are being judged. And here I want to point out two different things. One is just the subjective nature of these metrics. When a company is judged under the the old version of capitalism, they're judged based on the net value or how much profit they bring in a quarter. And these are more or less objective measurements on which you can compare a company to another company or a different industry. And these metrics, these ESG metrics, on the other hand, while some of them might be laudable, they're completely subjective. How do you determine how many ESG points a company gets if they pay a lot in taxes? And how do those points compare to the points I might get if I focus my attention on lowering my phosphorus emissions in my company's value chain? I'll tell you who won't be making those judgment calls: the so-called stakeholder. So what we end up with is a system where the elites have an exorbitant amount of power. They are the de facto rule makers, and the rule makers get to decide who are the winners and who are the losers. And then they can change the rules as they see fit whenever they want. Which brings me to the second point that I wanted to bring up here, is that they can change the rules whenever they want. So if you look at the ESG metrics, their focus on protecting the environment or pursuing social justice causes. And like I said, admittedly, some of these are laudable. But tell me, what is stopping them from adding new metrics? The answer is nothing. So don't be too surprised when ESG advocates start floating out metrics that intend to punish corporations for not cracking down on so-called hate speech. Forget about what the Constitution says, because remember, ESG is just a voluntary system. Or how about when our country inevitably suffers from like another tragic shooting? Do you think ESG rule makers will hesitate to initiate a few metrics that punish firms for being involved in businesses related to firearm manufacturing and sales? Because I don't. So we already are starting to see the signs of this. The Blaze, just a few months ago, ran a story about one of the largest trucking companies in the United States called Saia. And they announced that they're no longer going to be involved in the shipping of firearm products. So this entire scheme, running at full potential, has the power to essentially nullify anything that is protected in our Bill of Rights. They don't need stakeholders' consent. They don't need government's consent. They just need the companies to go along with it. which you might have thought was tougher, might have been a tougher sell. But as Justin just pointed out there, and what he will continue to point out, turns out it's not so much of a hard sell, apparently.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a massive problem, widely adopted. There's already the vast majority of companies in the United States today have adopted it. Why? Right. So why are they going along with ESG? We know, we have a sense of what it is. We know that it's not good. We know that it's putting elites in charge of the economy. We know it's transforming everything. We know it's part of the Great Reset. We know that it's not a good thing, but why is it happening? Well, there are roughly three reasons for why this is going on. The first is coercion from banks and insurance companies. The second is there's great coercion from asset managers. And then the third is that there's coercion from government. Notice that they all have coercion involved in the process. Coercion's a key part of this whole thing. No company is going to go along with this, or the vast majority of companies would not go along with this voluntarily. They're going along with it because there's something in it for them. There's carrots and there's sticks. And they're being coerced and they're being manipulated into going in this direction of ESG and adopting it. So we're going to go through all three of these different groups. There's a whole lot more we could say for each of these, and we're going to bring up in this presentation, but we don't have a whole lot of time. So we're going to, but I want to make sure that we hit at least every area so that you can see that this actually is a huge part of what's going on here. This is not just companies deciding that they're, the second coming of Jesus. They actually have a financial motive to go along with this. They're being coerced in some cases, going against their own interests, but they know that at the end of the day, they're better off moving in the direction of ESG than they are going against ESG. So let's first start off with banks and insurance companies. Large corporate banks, credit unions, insurance companies, they are using ESG right now to discriminate against a long list of industries and sub-industries, nonprofits, and even some individuals. We have evidence of this going on all over the country. Corporations and other businesses know that if they don't align their goals with ESG, then they're going to be punished by banks and other financial institutions, including insurance companies, meaning they're not going to have access to bank accounts. They're not going to have access to loans and other financial services. They're not going to be able to get access to insurance. And if you can't get a checking account and you can't get a loan and you can't get insurance, then you can't function as a business. So you have to go along with the direction that banks and insurance companies want you to go along with if you want to be in business at all, right? So if they say you got to do ESG and all of the banks and insurance companies, the major ones, are going along with it, then you have to have ESG in place. So when confronted with this, and there are people who are watching this video now, there might be some state lawmakers watching this video right now who know firsthand what this is like, who know that when you confront a bank or an insurance company about this issue and you say, hey, what are you doing with ESG? Why are you forcing them to do this? The first thing that they'll do is they'll deny that it's going on. They'll say, oh, there's no way this is happening. We're not doing anything like this. This is a lie. This is a 100% lie. And I could give you numerous examples, dozens and dozens and dozens of examples and proofs that show that banks are using ESG. But I'll just give you two very brief examples that I think prove the point. And from there, if you want to do more research into this, you certainly can. The first comes from Morningstar. Morningstar is a big financial advisory firm. They have on Wall Street, they are a massive force. They are pro ESG. Okay, so Morningstar is not anti ESG. They produced a report for banks that was all about sustainable banking. Okay, so this is a pro ESG organization, business, producing a pro ESG sustainability report for banks. All right, and in the report, it says this. This is a direct quote. Most major banks screen their lending portfolios against specific ESG risks as per the OECD due diligence guidance, and many embrace negative or positive screening for potential corporate lending transactions or project finance transactions. Screening strategies filter potential transactions using predetermined ESG criteria to rule companies in or out of contention for financing. Could they be any clearer than that?
Do you need any more proofs?
Do you need any more proofs? This isn't about one bank. This is about all banks. This is about all banks in the United States. And it says very clearly, most major banks screen their lending portfolios against specific ESG risks. I don't think we need to go any further than that. Later on, it talks about how sometimes there's a difference between positive screening and negative screening, where you might screen out businesses by using certain. Some banks that use ESG will say, "I won't do any business with you if you do ESG." All right. If you do certain things. So, for example, if you don't have enough electric cars, or you don't have a commitment to have more electric cars in the future, we're not going to do business with you. Maybe that's something that a bank will do using ESG reports. All right. They just screen them out. Or we don't do business with people who sell certain kinds of guns. All right. That's a real example. That's one way of doing it. But then there are also other banks that say, we'll do business with those people, but we're going to give huge financial incentives and advantages through interest rates and other things, certain bonds, if you are doing the ESG stuff. So they don't screen people out. They just provide people with carrots so that they do the things that they want them to do. So they give advantages. But either way, regardless of whether you're doing positive screening or you're doing negative screening, the point is they're screening people based on ESG metrics, and that this is a well-established fact, not an opinion, a well-established fact. Another example, this is about a specific bank. The last example was about all banks. This is about a specific bank, Bank of America. This is one of the largest banks in the entire world. It is, depending on the metric you're looking at, the largest bank in the United States, or it's certainly in the top 3. Again, depends on the metric. These quotes here come from a Bank of America document that is meant to provide a framework for social risk policy. Okay. So this is how this is an internal document about screening out certain kinds of companies based on environmental and social risks. Okay. So this is not an easy thing to find. You can find it on their website. It's not easy to do, but I found this in the ESG section, a citation to this in their ESG section of their annual report. So Bank of America talks about this. So this is what it says. A client relationship or transaction may require enhanced due diligence. Due diligence means ESG evaluation related to environmental and social issues due to a policy or standard, because a frontline unit or risk manager made a referral after standard due diligence, or if the client, business activity, industry, or geography is deemed sufficiently sensitive. In other words, if you go to get a loan, you're a business, you go to get a loan, whoever's doing the standard due diligence on the loan might say, I don't know. They sell guns at this company. And I don't know if it's like maybe Dick's Sporting Goods when they used to sell guns, for example, right? They sell guns. I don't know. I'm going to flag it. All right. And so they flag it. And then there's an enhanced due diligence process that goes on. And they look at all sorts of different things. As you can see here later on in the quotes, it says there's an evaluation of environmental matters that may include land and water use impacts, remediation, reclamation track record, climate risk reporting, community and stakeholder engagement, overall transparency, their relationship with relevant civil society organizations, their stakeholder engagement with local communities, including Indigenous peoples and First Nations relations. So if your business isn't doing enough, talk to First Nations groups, then I guess you're going to be screened out in certain cases, right? They look at later on that third paragraph of quotes here. The reviewed material under the enhanced due diligence after they flagged you includes regulatory filings, environmental and social impact reports and assessments, task force on climate-related financial disclosure reporting. That's a form of ESG, climate metrics, ESG and corporate social responsibility reports, and a media search that is focused on environmental and social reputation risk. In other words, is your company posting the right things on social media? Are they saying the right things when their CEOs are being interviewed on CNN and MSNBC and ABC? Those are the kinds of things that they're looking at. All of this is within the context. Everything that I just read to you is within the context of who do we screen out here at Bank of America? How do we screen them out? How do we make sure that we're not screening out the wrong people? This is all ESG, and this is straight from Bank of America saying, yes, we do this, and here are some of the things that we look at. So again, I could go on and on and on with other examples from other major banks talking about this. We don't have time for that, but you can see here, ironclad proof. Yes, banks are using ESG to punish certain businesses and to reward others based on how well they're performing in a variety of different banking metrics, all right, or ESG metrics. Another area is big finance and asset managers. All right, so there's a whole bunch of different groups that kind of fall underneath this. And these are the people that have a tendency to get a lot of the headlines, even though they're not necessarily the biggest players in this, although they do have a really big role in it. Investment managers is one of the biggest ones, right? So the big 10 investment managers, BlackRock, State Street, Global Advisors, Fidelity, etc., they control more than $34 trillion in assets. They are all in on ESG. Just to give a reference, $34 trillion is a lot of money. The total consumer spending in 2020 in the United States was $12.5 trillion. All right. So you can see how if you're a company and BlackRock, State Street, Fidelity, et cetera, come to you and say, we want you to do ESG, and they control $34 trillion in assets, that's more important to you than your everyday run-of-the-mill Joe and Jane walking down the street with, $200 in their wallet, right? Because all of Americans combined are spending $12.5 trillion a year, whereas just the big 10 investment managers, not all of them, control $34 trillion in assets. So if you're just chasing money, you're going to go with the big investment managers. You're not going to go with the regular everyday person. These big asset managers are using stock ownership to control what companies are doing. I could spend a ton of time on this. We don't have time to talk about that. But the bottom line is there has been a massive amount of consolidation of stock ownership over the past couple of decades. And in 2017, this is now kind of outdated, but in 2017, there was an analysis of this that showed that about 20% of the stock ownership was in the hands of some of the biggest companies in America, was in the hands of just 3 asset managers: BlackRock, State Street, and I think Vanguard was the other one. So they're casting about 25% of the votes. I mean, they are pulling the strings for many big corporations on Wall Street. It's just a handful of people. So if this handful of asset managers decide they want you to go all in on ESG, you really don't have a choice. You have to go all in on ESG. All right. So the others, credit scoring agencies like Moody's, Fitch Ratings, S&P Global, they have tied bond ratings. This is how a lot of corporations are effectively getting loans. This is how they're getting access to capital. They've tied bond ratings to ESG. This is very well established. The bond market is worth over $1 trillion a year. So this is a massive, massive market, and ESGs are built into that. So if you want to have a good bond rating, which means you want a low interest rate when you're getting money, you have to have a good ESG score. So there's all sorts of evidence that shows this. Just take my word for it. It's true. Okay. We don't have time to go into all of that. The bottom line is ESG is a big part of determining how bond ratings are being formulated by groups like Moody's and Fitch Ratings and S&P Global today. And corporations care about that because they want access to capital.
Yeah, and then just from those first 2, like you could have the system working at full steam just from the coercion of those first 2 sources there. But we have also seen that the government is starting to put their thumbs on the scales too. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to very, very briefly run through a couple of examples. So the first one I want to talk about is this so-called Made in America office. This was signed into law via executive order by Joe Biden. And at first glance, this seems just like a very pro-America thing. But if you look close enough at it, you'll see that it makes government agencies buy from the right companies, perhaps ones with high ESG scores. I don't know. The SEC has proposed new climate-related disclosure requirements for public companies. This essentially amounts to mandatory ESG disclosure. And also initiated by the Biden administration is the First Movers Coalition, which is a partnership between the U.S. government and the World Economic Forum for the purpose of meeting certain climate goals. So you could already see that the United States government is starting to do more and more stuff when it comes to this. Coordination between social media companies and the Biden administration to stop misinformation. Now, most of this is in the context of fighting back against COVID misinformation, but we are seeing that this is getting awfully close to trying to dispel certain climate misinformation as well. And then also central bank digital currencies, which is a thing that's been floated for a little bit now. And I'm not short on speculation, but I am short on time. So I'll just say that there are potential for a lot of strings to be attached to some system like this, which has all sorts of different ESG implications. But if you message us independently or want more information on this, we can supply more information on that. And then while on this side of the Atlantic, we're still pretending that this is a voluntary movement from corporations that care. But on the other side of the Atlantic, they seem fully ready to use the heavy hand of the government to force ESG. So in February of 2022, the European Commission approved a version of a mandatory ESG system. International law firm Sherman and Sterling noted, quote, if adopted, all European Union member states would be required to implement the directive into their national laws. This will result in substantive due diligence requirements being imposed on companies, whether based in the European Union or selling their products and services into the European Union across their entire value chain, with potential sanctions for non-compliance. So this is very important because any U.S. firm that does business in Europe in any way really would be and could be forced to play by these rules under punishment of sanctions. So this is kind of similar to the idea in California where they impose strict vehicle standards, and this influences nationwide standards. So it's kind of a similar idea that if they were to initiate this in full effect in Europe, it could ripple across the entire ocean. So it seems like we're getting to a point where there's no escape. Almost no escape. Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah. I'm not quite as pessimistic as you are. There's almost no escaping it. Basically, if you thought all of this was enough, and you thought elites have built themselves this incredible system, how could they possibly do more than everything we've already talked about? Think again. They're not done. They have a whole lot more that they're doing to make sure that people are in compliance with ESG. One of the craziest things and one of the most diabolical things is an ESG score predictor that's been put into place. There's actually, I think, multiple versions of it, but the one that I'm most familiar with is by Moody's Analytics. Moody's created a ESG score predictor as a way to make sure that small businesses and medium-sized businesses are also in compliance with ESG, because they're not producing ESG reports. The mom and pop pizza shop down the street, they don't have an ESG report, right? So how do we make sure that they're doing the things that the big corporations are doing it? So Pizza Hut might have it, but the mom and pop shop might not. How do we make sure they're in compliance too? Well, this is where we come up with this ESG score predictor. Literally, the ESG score predictor is an algorithm that creates an ESG score. It literally creates it out of thin air. These people don't have ESG reports. There's no one auditing these companies, giving them ESG scores. They built an algorithm that predicts what the ESG score would be. So directly from Moody's, the ESG score predictor leverages state-of-the-art advanced analytics. That's an algorithm that provides 54 ESG scores and subscores for any given company, using location, sector, and size. Moody's claims that its score predictor, coupled with its database of self-reported ESG scores, provides 140 million ESG reports for public and private companies globally. 140 million. So if you don't have an ESG score, they will make an ESG score up for you. You will be in compliance with this. They will make sure that it happens. And if you don't like the ESG score you're assigned, well, then produce your own ESG report. That way, everyone is going to be in compliance one way or the other, right? It makes a lot of sense. So what about individuals, right? We've been talking about businesses. We've been talking about small businesses, medium-sized businesses, a lot of talk about large corporations, financial institutions, Wall Street firms, etc. But what about individuals? Well, there is a massive amount of evidence that shows that individuals will be brought into the ESG scoring system, whether they want to be or not. And there's 5 evidences that I want people to keep in mind. Some of these are about ESG scores being applied to individuals in the future. Some of this is about ESG scores being applied today, but it's all important to keep in mind going forward. The first is that individual social credit scores already exist with Merrill Lynch, JP Morgan, and others. All right. For example, this is an actual ESG score that has been provided to an individual's investment account at Merrill Lynch. All right. Merrill Lynch is owned by Bank of America. All right. As you can see, the average ESG score here, they're measured in 3 different ways based on the investments that this person made. This is a person who works with us at the Heartland Institute. I'm not going to tell you who because he's clearly a degenerate. He only has a 4.7 out of 10 on his ESG score.
It's not me. It's not me.
No, it's not you. It's true. It's not you, and it's not me either. 6 out of 10 for environmental, 4.7 out of 10 in social, and 4.6 out of 10 in governance. This is all based on the investments that this person has made. And they don't have a lot of money in this account, by the way, either. So this isn't about, you don't have to have millions of dollars for this to be applied to you. Anyone that has a Merrill Lynch account already has an ESG score. Millions of people have this already. All right. So we know that they can apply it to individuals because in some cases they already are. Net zero commitments by banks. This is really important. All the big banks have made net zero commitments, all of them. They've said that by a certain period of time, usually it's by 2050 or so, they're going to go completely net zero. The only way that a bank can go completely net zero in all of their activities is if they have a way of knowing that the people that they're giving loans and banking services to are also going net zero. And how can they know that unless there's some sort of ESG-like report for individuals? That's the only way. Otherwise, how can they know that when they give you a house or a loan for a house or a loan for a car or whatever, that you're not buying a gasoline-powered car, you're not buying a house that runs on natural gas, et cetera? There must be some sort of an individualized ESG report for at least your property. Otherwise, that doesn't work. The same thing is true with insurance companies. Lots of insurance companies have made this commitment. How can they follow through on that commitment unless they have some way of knowing the people they're doing business with are also in compliance with ESG reports? And then there's this incredible prediction. This is evidence number 4 from FICO. FICO is the leader on individual credit scores. So if you want to get a loan or something like that, your FICO credit report's going to be pulled almost certainly. FICO in 2021, at the end of 2021, put on their website a prediction of things that were going to happen in the future. And one of the things that they predicted is that the ESG agenda was going to be applied to new areas, eventually including with individuals. So the direct quote says, in financial institutions, much of the ESG agenda is delivered at the corporate level. But in 2022, we expect to see an increased focus on bringing ESG data into more granular levels of lending and investment decisions. That means individuals and small businesses. Over the longer term, we expect that ESG and climate risk evaluations will become an integral element of credit risk and affordability assessment. So this is the leader in credit reports and credit scoring saying, we think that ESG is going to be applied to everybody pretty soon. We don't know exactly when, but we think that's what's going to happen. That's what it looks like is going on in the industry. All right. So this is a prediction from somebody in the industry, from a leader of the industry saying, yes, this is going to be applied to individuals or at least their property at some point going forward. And then evidence number 5 is something we definitely don't have time to get into, but it's a really, really important topic. The Great Narrative, which is essentially this new movement from the World Economic Forum and others to take the ESG system and to embed it into all sorts of new technologies that are emerging. Artificial intelligence, the metaverse, virtual reality, all of these technologies are being built from the ground up right at the very start with ESG in their bloodstreams so that they don't have to come back in 10 years and figure out a way to impose ESG on these new technologies, they're already built with ESG in them. And there's a whole bunch of evidence that's related to that, but that's for another presentation at another time.
Yeah, so by now you can kind of tell why we were so kind of taken back when we started putting all these puzzle pieces together. It just seems like the infrastructure's there. We're not catching this at the ground level. Like, this has been being built for a while now. So it just seems like an insurmountable task. But I am pleased to say that we have had some success. We've had major success with a lot of help from Glenn Beck, of course, by getting this topic into the national conversation. Like, when you hear people talking about the Great Reset and ESG, that is in part because of the work that we've already been doing. And we've already started seeing some pushback on the state level. So most of this action is what I refer to as kind of the low-hanging fruit. This is the divesting state pension funds from ESG. And we've already seen some states do this. We've already seen some states gearing up to do this. But as you can see from this chart over here, red state pensions, when you add up all the different red states, it's about $1.4 trillion worth of assets. Grouping in purple states would add an additional $500 billion to that. But divesting these funds from ESG could take almost $2 trillion bite out of this ESG system. So it's a really good first step for states. But again, it's only the first step. And I say the first step because, as we've mentioned earlier, there are a lot of major players in this game. The Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, or GFANZ, is composed of most major banks, most major investment firms, most major insurance firms, asset owners, financial service providers, investment consultants, you name it, they're in it. And together, under their management, they have $150 trillion in assets. And I'll say that again in case you think I mistakenly said trillion instead of billion. $150 trillion of assets under management there. So to put that terrifying number into perspective, here's a figure that shows a pie chart of the red state pensions and the purple state pensions compared to that $150 trillion that's being managed by GFANZ. And I don't point this out to kind of squash your hopes that states can make a difference. Like I said, the pension defunding is a good first step, but we just need to fight more and more and more. So like I mentioned, Justin and I have been in this fight for a while, but when we first covered all of this, we didn't have a strategy in mind to fight against all of this. We were just pointing it out. We were just ranting and raving. We got Glenn Beck to rant and rave. Justin wrote op-eds. We wrote research papers. We did radio interviews. We did everything that we could to sound the alarm on ESG and the Great Reset. And it actually had an impact. Like I said, certain states started getting into action, paying attention. Suddenly we're getting calls from people and legislators that wanted to know what they could do to fight against all of this. And with the help of Glenn Beck, we sent out letters from the Heartland Institute to every state and federal lawmaker in the country. It was really a grassroots effort. And what really started to give me hope was that the World Economic Forum, the Davos elites themselves, flinched. They suddenly started running away from the Great Reset term that they made up, might I add. They made up the Great Reset term. Now they're running away from it. They're starting to refer to this as some other, I forget what their terminology for it is, like 2022 agenda or something like that.
Yeah, Davos agenda and stuff like that. Yep.
Right. And they even issued an apology for sounding like they were trying to take over the world. And if we had time, we would play that video because it's just incredible. And it was then that I thought we might have a chance here. You know, they say sunlight is the best disinfectant, and we're over here shining the biggest lights that we can squarely in the face of this ESG virus. And since then, we've had even more victories. So, Justin, take us home.
Yeah, so some of the most encouraging things. I mean, obviously, there's been states all over the country that have been fighting back against ESG. We have actions from state treasurers. We've had actions from state legislators all over the country. Many of these people are in the room here or are going to be in the room at this presentation we have coming up. They're not here right now, but those people are going to see what we're doing on. They've been working hard on ESG. They have seen the writing on the wall. They know how dangerous this is, and they've been fighting in states all across the country. More than I think it's like 24 states you've had action on ESG, which is absolutely incredible. But we've also seen it at the congressional level as well. Right from the very beginning, we saw the Trump administration, just prior to Donald Trump leaving office, put a rule into place at the OCC that was designed to basically force large financial institutions to treat customers fairly, not to discriminate based on what kind of industries they're in, so that you really couldn't use ESG as a way to discriminate. We've had the Biden administration immediately came in, killed that new rule at the OCC right away, literally in the first week that Biden came into power. So you had congressmen and congresswomen proposed the Fair Access to Banking Act, sponsored by Senator Kevin Cramer in the Senate and then Andy Barr in the House of Representatives. They both put this out in 2021. This got more than 80 sponsors in the House, if I remember right, more than 20, I think it was 26 sponsors, co-sponsors in the Senate. So huge names on the Republican side nationally have supported this. So there's lots of interest for this in Congress. I have had the pleasure of meeting with congressional staffers, members of Congress, as well as other people who work with me. And we know there's a lot of interest. We've talked to these people directly. In 2022, Ron DeSantis, who very well might be running for president of the United States. We don't know that yet, but he could be running for president. In 2022, he came out and said that he's fighting against ESG. He divested from he had the state of Florida divest from some of the biggest ESG advocates on Wall Street. He said that he's going to be supporting legislation in Florida that's directly attacking ESG. And so absolutely incredible stuff. But my favorite thing, the thing that has given me, I don't want to say it's given me the most amount of hope that we can push back against this, but the thing that really gets me more fired up than anything else is this letter that this literally just happened earlier in November. This letter from several senators, including Tom Cotton, Mike Lee, Charles Grassley, Marsha Blackburn, and Marco Rubio. These 5 senators sent out letters to law firms all across the country that represent, I think it was more than 50, that represent corporate clients. And it said to them, look, we're coming after you on ESG. ESG is no good, and we're coming after you. And so I want to take the time to read this letter because it is very short. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And I hope that it inspires everyone watching this video to take action in whatever way they can, whether that means talking to neighbors about this issue, whether that means calling lawmakers to talk about this issue, getting involved locally in organizations and Tea Party groups and other groups that are focused on protecting individual liberty, because everyone needs to understand this is one of the most important issues facing the country today. And the people at the highest rungs of power are taking this seriously. You need to take this seriously too. So this letter is incredible. It says here, I'm going to read not the whole thing, but most of it. We are writing about your firm's environmental, social, and governance practice. Although businesses would certainly be wise to lawyer up before undertaking ESG initiatives, that's incredible. Your firm has a duty to fully inform clients of the risks they incur by participating in climate cartels and other ill-advised ESG schemes. Wow, that is really strong language. It goes on to then talk about how FTC commissioners, that's the Federal Trade Commission, have admitted, as well as an assistant attorney general in the antitrust division, that ESG practices might be an antitrust violation. Okay, so they should probably pay attention to that. It could be considered a form of collusion. And if it is considered a form of collusion, then that means that corporations that engage in it, banks and financial institutions that engage in it, they might be breaking antitrust laws.
Wow.
So he goes in and talks about that. And then the letter says the ESG movement attempts to weaponize corporations to reshape societies in ways that Americans would never endorse at the ballot box. Absolutely true. Of particular concern is the collusive effort to restrict the supply of coal, oil, and gas, which is driving up energy costs across the globe and empowering America's adversaries abroad. Over the coming months and years, Congress will increasingly use its oversight powers to scrutinize the institutional antitrust violations being committed in the name of ESG and refer those violations to the FTC and the Department of Justice. So, to the extent that your firm continues to advise clients regarding participation in ESG initiatives, both you and those clients should take care to preserve relevant documents in anticipation of those investigations. Absolutely incredible. So as you can see, it's not just people like me and Donnie who frankly don't have any power talking about ESG. It's lawmakers across the country. It's state treasurers across the country. It's the Trump administration when they were in power with making rules at the OCC. It's members of the Senate. It's members of Congress. It's Ron DeSantis. And of course, you have these particular members of the Senate who are really pushing back hard against ESG. There's all sorts of people on the right taking notice of this now. So now is the time to strike. Now is the time to fight back. Now is the time to push back against ESG. We have the momentum on our side. It's important that we continue pushing in this direction because if we can put enough pressure on these big institutions to reverse course, I believe they will, because we've started to see them flinch. As Donnie said earlier, it's going to get worse the more pressure they get. So now is the time to push back on ESG. And if this presentation hasn't been enough to prove to you that ESG is an important topic, then you're lost. I'm sorry.
I know that we went over a lot of stuff here, and I think we'll try to figure out a way to make this PowerPoint available to anyone that wants it. But the more information you can find on our various websites, whether it's heartland.org, stoppingsocialism.com, or you can find other videos like this on our channel, Stopping Socialism TV. And like I said at the beginning of this, we really do think that this is the most important topic going on in the country right now. So do what you can to help spread the word of this, help spread this video around just by hitting that share button, hitting that like button, subscribing if you haven't already, or even just putting a comment. All of these things help break through that big tech algorithm that prevents content like this from being shown to more people. Justin, any final words before I hit this end record button?
Yeah. Last thing, if you're interested in this, you've got a specific question that you want to have answered that we didn't cover in this presentation, and you can't find it at heartland.org, because if you go to the heartland.org website, there's a big thing there for ESG, stopping ESG. You'll find all kinds of additional resources there. If you can't find it there and you have questions, you can reach out to me on social media at Justin T. Haskins. You can email me at jhaskins@heartland.org or Donnie at dkendal@heartland.org. And we'll provide you with any of the information that you need that we haven't been able to give you so far. So I know this is really complicated stuff, but it really is the most important thing facing the country today. And so it's vital that everyone understands what's going on here so that we can push back against it and make this a sort of a benchmark, a standard that everybody on the right needs to adhere to. If you're not against ESG, then you're not really with us. Okay, it's got to be like raising taxes is, okay, right? If you're for raising taxes on everybody, you're probably not a conservative. Well, if you're in support of ESG, or even if you're just not willing to fight back against it, then you're really not on the right side of this issue. And so you need to take that seriously. And I hope that people watching this video will.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone once again for tuning in. And until next time, have a good one.